Good evening. We're going to try this again. We're going to review movies, movie trailers specifically. The ones I want to check out are Scarlet and the Black, For Greater Glory, Day of the Siege, and Pies the 12th, Under the Sky. So here's what we're going to do with that. We're going to start with the Day of the Siege, which is a battle movie about the Siege of Vienna, one of the most important battles in Christendom history. So let's go ahead and set that up. So, boom. All right. There we go. Okay.
It is a task in which no commander of the whole Ottoman Empire has ever succeeded. Conquer the Golden Apple, Vienna, and then lead my army to Rome.
You have come here to ask this poor monk for a miracle.
How many men do you estimate? 300,000.
I don't know what the deal is with the speed, but anyway, basically, there's this monk in here who is actually a blessed. I forget his name, but I have seen this movie at least 2 times. You can find it on Formed if you have a subscription to Formed. I highly recommend watching it. It is actually takes place on September 11th. September 12th was the victory, I think. But it was a long siege. I think the battle started in July. But obviously doesn't, go into all the full details of everything, but, it just gives us the snippets of it. But it's a really good movie. Really recommend watching it. I think it's enjoyable. I think it's good to get into the mindset as to why our enemies don't like us so much, and not to be stuck in the American mindset of 9/11 is a defeat, but really 9/11 for Christendom, for Christianity, was a victory. In the old world, the Battle of Vienna saved Central Europe from the Ottoman takeover. And the Muslims, they know these dates, and they choose to do their certain attacks on these dates to try to erase the history. So it's important to know why we have these dates. It's so we can appreciate the grander scheme of history and not just be stuck at 1776. We Americans need to understand better our history, and even our history before us.
It's not to me you must pray, but to God. You will have to fight.
And soon, our crescent flag will float from this spire.
You will have to kill other human beings.
My informers tell me that I should fear you far more than Leopold's generals.
I want to save your soul.
Again, it's a really good movie. You should check it out. I try to watch this movie in September usually, just to give us a better scope of what's actually happening and to keep memory alive of historical events. So now we're going to do so now for greater glory. So now, there we go. For Greater Glory, starring Peter O'Toole and Andy Garcia. This one, Mexican Cristero Wars, by the the hostile Mexican president that was sponsored by the Freemasons.
Mexico is under siege. A plot to poison the minds and hearts of our people, to turn them into religious fanatics. This evil, this threat, it will not be tolerated.
You're an army fighting for God and for the church. We will fight with honor and dignity.
In the United States, we've been following your war with the Catholic Church.
I would hardly call it a war.
Unfortunately, since this happened like 98 years ago, there's a lot of apathy on the United States in this film. And obviously the clergy couldn't really touch the situation. They had to privately support this thing, if they did support it at all, or they ran away and they fled from it. Specifically talking about the Hispanic clergy. The other one is actually the Catholic boycott of the economy. Then they knew that this had to be not just militarily planned, but had to be economically, because the churches were shutting down. They were being locked up by the government. So the Catholics had to boycott certain things, as far as not buying certain materials, not doing certain things with certain businesses, catechizing their children and their families privately, going to underground masses, things like that. And then, when they realized that, the clergy couldn't go outside with their garbs on, their vestments and things like that. They couldn't process with relics or crucifixes or images and things. Then that's when they knew they had to take back the country. And again, it's a different approach than what happened in Poland. So let's go on from there.
There is a time for peace, time for war.
Even if I were younger, I would not fight.
You cannot fight for something you don't believe in.
I believe in freedom. The fate of Mexico is in God's hands, not yours or mine.
This will be one of the most important battles of our struggle.
If you lose this war, we're not going to lose this war.
Why are you here?
We want to be Cristeros.
All right, so obviously this film was about the Saint Jose. I believe he is the saint now. Benedict the 16th canonized him, I believe. So he was too young to join the Cristeros eventually, but he managed to be accepted in anyway. But he died professing Viva Cristo Rey, long live Christ the King. So that's important to remember. So let's go on.
Cristeros.
Yes.
We are going to send a message that freedom is our lives, and we will defend it or die trying. ¡Que viva Cristo Rey! ¡Que viva Cristo Rey!
So oh no, did we just do all that without being seen? Okay. All right. Basically, this one is good. It came out 12 years ago. It's not overly preachy. It has good cinematography, good acting, good music, good believable performances, good set designs, things like that. I recommend seeing it again. A lot of people don't give Christian movies the benefit of the doubt, but this one, the production value is pretty high, and there's more that I can say for other Christian films, unfortunately for this day and age. Well, I want to say there's a period of time in the early 2000s, before 2004, where a lot of Christian films were just not really great quality. But this one was actually pretty decent. So let's see. All right, so next one would be This one's a World War II film based on Hugh Flattery and Pius XII. I really recommend watching this movie because it's a classic. I only saw this movie a few years ago. I did not know about it, but it was the
We have respected Vatican territory, but it has been violated again and again.
Then I suggest you make your report to your authorities, Colonel.
I am the authority in Rome, and I tell you that an illegal organization exists which is hiding prisoners of war and is being directed by one of your staff. I want to question him.
I regret that will not be possible.
You know who I'm talking about. Monsignor O'Flaherty of the Holy Office. He has charges to answer.
I'm afraid that I cannot give my permission.
I ask only out of courtesy. I intend to question him now.
I know your methods of questioning, Colonel. Even of priests. Bear in mind, you where you are, and that all my officials here have diplomatic immunity.
So, basically, this particular film gives us the perspective of the Monsignor more so than Pius XII. This film has a lot of the refugees from the Allies that fought World War II that were fleeing to Rome. And it's all what that white line that separates Rome from the Vatican, and diplomatic neutrality and things like that. And human was also involved with obviously sheltering the Jews and trying to help them be able to relocate and hide from the Nazi break-ins and things like that, to try to ship them off to the death camps. So this film actually is more so about the priest's perspective than it is about the Pope's perspective. The companion piece to this film, which is Pius XII, Rome Under the Sky, is more so about the Pope's side of it, which I recommend watching those two movies back to back, because it is two sides of the same coin.
There is nothing more to be said. If you wish to create an incident here, Colonel Kepler, then please continue.
Or Flattery. So, obviously, I forget the Nazi official that was officially in charge of occupation of Rome, but his character obviously plays a factor in both movies, both The Scarlet and the Black and Pius XII Under the Sky. Uh, although I think this film does a better job in some ways of appealing to the man's humanity and getting him to realize that he needs to put his family first above the government's wishes. And I don't really want to give the ending away to this film, but I really recommend it. It's actually a classic. I do consider it probably one of the best Christian films. Um, it's entertaining, especially like more modern uh, historical films. I believe this film came out in the '80s, which is saying something for the 1980s. Usually, a lot of times, Christian movies or Christian pro-based Christian movies were not very common in the '80s. A lot of the times, they started getting more watered down and uh, you know depreciative of the Christian culture. So let's see. Let's go. And yeah, so that one's actually pretty good. I recommend watching it. Again, it came out before Pius XII did. Pius XII is a much newer movie, but I do think it is essential to watch them back to back. Maybe. See if we can. Yeah, Rome under the Roman sky. Sorry. Let's see. Films by.
There are two ways to help lose weight: by eating this food for breakfast,
Come on.
or the thing 90% of people do. Which would you choose?
The mission of the church is entrusted into the hands. The mission of the church is into the hands of men, with all their weaknesses, uncertainties, fears. fears of responding because we feel the evil hovering over us, ready to attack.
We estimate that about 10,000 Jews are being hidden in Rome. Up until now, Rome has provided refuge for them, but it will soon become their turn. So we don't have any more excuses.
For what?
Not to fight for my country.
This family has come to us looking for a place to hide.
This is the used convent.
But this is an emergency.
We should be ready to welcome anyone who needs our help. And therefore, all our institutes, parishes, convents, and monasteries should be opened to whomever seeks shelter.
We've taken control of Holland, France, Poland, the Vatican. It's no bigger than a football stadium. Would it really be that hard to attack?
So, this film right here, while it is more about Pius XII's side, and you don't get Father O'Flaherty in this film, you do see the other side of the coin. You see the more administrative level of what the Pope is having to do for the entire Vatican versus what one individual priest is having to do for multiple organizations. Now, in the 1940s, when the World War II was still going on, and the Nazis were still persecuting their political enemies as well as the Jews and their religious enemies, this movie states at the beginning that when the Pope Pius XII was still an archbishop, he said one of the Dutch bishops spoke out against the Nazi regime, and the Nazi retaliation toward that congregation and toward the clergy in that nation was slaughtered. The reason Pius XII gave his reason for not speaking out as vocally as he did was if his reasoning was if the archbishop caused that much damage for speaking out, how much more so would the Pope do? So this film does the most amount of accreditation to the Pope and his work to save the Jews in the World War II. It debunks all the myths of the 1960s about Pius XII being a certain person's Pope, which is completely, and I mean completely erroneous. If you listen to quotes from the Jews in the 1950s and going into before 1962, you will see that Pius XII had a commendable reputation amongst the Jewish people in how he helped save their lives. This film does the best job of any movie to dispel the myth of Pius XII being too soft on Nazis. Are there some things he could have done better on? Yes. And is the film perfect? No. This film is has some dubbing problems, I think, because it's the ADR is not great. Is it better than Scarlet and the Black? See, I kind of look at them as the one movie. The only difference is one just has cleaner picture and is less grainy because of the story. The story is so linked to my head. They're so tight knit that I have a hard time judging it. But this film it's brilliant if you want to dispel the myths about Pius XII being a Nazi sympathizer. He couldn't be further from the truth. Couldn't be further from the truth. I recommend watching it. The movie is called Pius XII Under the Roman Sky. And you'll see that this film and Black Scarlet has some crossover with particularly some scenes about how early on they tried to stop the Nazis from sieging the Jewish tenants of the city. So let's go.
Or hundreds of thousands of innocent people must die before the Pope raises his voice in their defense.
I cannot rally one people against another.
Germany needs the love of its men. Men who do not soil its honor with unworthy actions.
Führer ordered us to kidnap the Pope.
They're already preparing an appropriate place for his detention in Austria. Holiness must leave Rome immediately.
Peters for any reason.
You should condemn the Nazis in front of the whole. I tell you for your own good. May the name of the Lord be praised now and forever.
Above all, you are a man. One of God's creatures.
Your Holiness, it's not mine. It's the blood of Rome. Today, the whole civil and Christian world has its eyes fixed on Rome.
So let's see. Normal password. Again, I recommend this one as a companion piece to the Scarlet and the Black because of the storyline. It's critical to know both sides of it, and more so this one to some extent because we need to dispel the myth of the Catholics being overly sympathetic with the Nazis. It's just not the truth. And Pius XII did more, in fact, than most of the leaders of the free world. than most of Europe as well. And yet there was this aggressive campaign after the 1950s to try to smear and tarnish his name with propaganda to destroy this holy pope's good name. I mean, he did the best he could with the resources he had. I really recommend watching this film. The situation with the gold is an overlapping quality between Scarlet and the Black in this film, and it's a good connective piece. So I recommend watching this film. So both of them are important. So let's see. There's another one. So how about this? Okay. The Mission. And this movie was made in the 80s as well, and it's considered one of the best that ever come out. So
little in this world holds as we predict. Indeed, how could the Indians have supposed that the death of this unsung priest would bring among them a man whose life was to become inextricably intertwined with their own?
Tell them they must leave the mission.
They say it was the will of God that they came out of the jungle and built the mission. They don't understand why God has changed his mind. You should never become a priest.
But I am a priest, and they need me.
If you die with blood on your hands, you betray everything we've done. If might is right, love has no place in the world.
A man of war. A man of peace. A land of timeless beauty. An age of conquest. The laws of heaven. The way of the world. The lives in the balance. Now, from the director of The Killing Fields, comes this year's winner of the Best Picture.
Okay. I've seen this movie a few times. Actually, mentions the Pope's letters about condemning the Portuguese and slavery and things like that during the missions to South America. It has its moments. I mean, it's got a thrilling end. It's got a good beginning, and it's about a story about repentance in some ways. It's also a story about martyrdom. So it's got some good Catholic imagery in there. It's got good acting. Again, it's got Liam Neeson. It has Robert De Niro, Jeremy Irons, and several other big name actors for 1986. It's also a Best Picture Oscar. Again, doesn't really mean anything in this day and age. I mean, but still, this film is professionally really well done. It's got good music, got good visuals, got good acting. It's got good set designs. It's believable. The professionalism of the film is key and on par with a lot of other film productions of the day. So I really recommend watching this film. It's not the greatest in my opinion, but definitely you got some good ones there. So
Award at the Cannes Film Festival. The Mission.
Yeah. Again, recommend it. It's pretty good. So let's go older. We're gonna go Man of All Seasons trailer. Come on, all caps. So this movie is about Thomas More and Henry VIII, and the great question of the infamous so-called divorce of Henry.
From the unforgettable award comes the Best Picture of the Year, starring the Best Actor of the Year.
Sir Thomas More, you have been found guilty of high treason. The sentence of the court.
My lords, when I was practicing law, the manner was to ask the prisoner before pronouncing sentence if he had anything to say.
Have you anything to say?
Yes.
Honored by 6 Academy Awards. A Man for All Seasons.
Sir Thomas More, have you anything to say to me regarding the King's marriage with Queen Anne?
I understood I was not to be asked that again.
Then evidently you understood wrongly. These charges
are terrors for children, Master Secretary, not for me.
A Man for All Seasons, winner of 6 Academy Awards, including Best Actor, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Picture of the Year.
You're dangerous to know.
You don't know me.
I do know you.
I mean, as a friend.
I am your friend. I wish I wasn't, but I am. Sir Thomas! Sir Thomas!
Halls.
Okay. There's another film that is made about another St. Thomas. It's about St. Thomas Becket, which, chronologically speaking, takes place about 400 years before Thomas More does. And, it's about the King of England and, the Chancellor's office versus the bishop. And, it's a different story with Becket. It's a different quality film. This one is got a lot of heart. It is about a man who stands on his convictions even when the whole nation is against him. And he is a hero for this millennium. He stands out for his willingness to speak out in private as well as in public. And he is a hero when it comes to his silence as well. He was a man of principle and a well-deserved saint. And the only issue I have with this film is that I wish there would have been more conversations with St. John Fisher, who was also the companion who was martyred. Well, his feast day is shared with St. Thomas More in the Novus Ordo calendar, but John Fisher was the only bishop that stood up against Henry VIII, and Thomas More stood up against Henry VIII in private. I really wish in this movie there would have been more of a representation of that on film. But, you know, for the most part, this film was pretty good. I mean, again, there's something about these older movies that are better made than today. Again, this is 1966. This film came out 20 years before The Mission did, and The Mission was brilliant. So, yeah. So I like this film a lot. We watch this movie usually about every June, around his feast day, around June 22nd, June 21st, so the close to the feast of St. John the Baptist, which is, you know, the 23rd or 24th of June. So, which is interesting about Thomas More and John the Baptist is, you know, if you know anything about how John the Baptist dies, then it's foretelling of how the fate of St. Thomas is. Now, if I'm not going to spoil what happens, but, you know, if you don't know his life, I recommend reading up briefly on it. The most famous thing that's, according to secular literature, that St. Thomas More wrote was the Book of Utopia. So, you know, he was a moral man who had high regard for a moral society. And he's a brilliant thinker. He's a lawyer. He is a Chancellor of England. And he was a good friend of Henry VIII before this knocking of the heads over the question of his marriage. Henry VIII was not happy when things broke down between him and what happened to Thomas. Like, he just wasn't the same. Like, he basically lost faith in a lot of people after Thomas didn't come around, basically. So let's continue.
Schofield, hailed as Best Actor of the Year for his performance as Thomas More. Wendy Hillard as the woman behind the man. Leo McKern as Cromwell, the conspirator. Robert Shaw as the lusty King Henry VIII.
Please come in. You know? Your Grace? Spare me your discretion. He's been to play in the muck again.
Orson Welles as Cardinal Wolsey. And Danny York as the daughter torn between love and loyalty.
Margaret! What is it, Meg?
Father, there's a new act. It's going through Parliament.
Oh?
By this act, they're going to administer an oath about the marriage.
On what compulsion is the oath?
High treason.
Yep. Again, recommend seeing this film if you are a history buff with the English Renaissance history and the English Protestant revolts and the Catholic counter revolts. This film actually is pretty entertaining and pretty historically informative to what actually happened. Thomas More lost a lot of people who he once trusted and regarded as friends, and even the enemies who regarded him as enemy back before things broke down between him and Henry. It just made that dynamic all the more tense. When he also has people that wanted his help, but for prudent reasons, he didn't help because people that were trying to get his help were not of goodwill and would turn on him in future affairs. And again, I don't give too many details away, and I won't say who it is, but all saints have their Judases. Basically, every saint has somebody, unfortunately, in their life that commits the sin of treachery, commits the sin of betrayal, and it hurts. And that's usually what leads to some of the saints being imprisoned, maimed, or have their reputation destroyed. So, again, Eighth Commandment issues are very, very hard to reparate for. So, let's conclude this trailer. There's only about, there's.
Thomas? Thomas? Thomas?
Again, I recommend this movie a lot. If you're looking for a movie to watch for St. Thomas More's feast day, Man of All Seasons, it is the way to go. There's a TV show called The Tudors, which also has the storyline of Henry and Thomas in there. But, I would not recommend it because while it is historically newer to watch and the picture's cleaner, the craft is more up to date to 21st century eyes, and high definition 4K. Well, it's not 4K. High definition footage. I can't recommend it because it has too much pornographic material. Just you don't want to see it. So even though it has those inserts of famous people in there, like dealing with Michelangelo and the Pope, and the King of Spain and the King of England not getting along, and the trial of Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII, and settling the divorce, and Cardinal Wolsey and his scheming, trying to play politics and things like that. It's got all that in there. The show's called The Tudors, but the Man of All Seasons just blows the Tudors out of the way. So just watch Man for All Seasons. It's light years better, cleaner, and a better crafted material, and better acted too. I mean, there's not anything really wrong in the Man for All Seasons as far as acting. No cheesy acting. And the Tudors is not a Christian made film, but it has Christian moments, Catholic moments specifically, as well as Protestant. But it is not. I mean, it is not well acted in certain areas. Like the person who plays Henry VIII, there's certain things that the acting is just I'm not convinced by it. So let's see. Let's do Beckett. Again, this movie came out before Man of All Seasons. Really good film. This film is also about another St. Thomas, 400 years before Thomas More. This film is also about another Henry, which is Henry II.
It happened in Canterbury, England, 8 centuries ago. The story is ageless as time itself. The immortal story of a man called Becket, who earned a king's most trusted friendship.
Business, my lord.
Who shared his most intimate secrets.
I must say I adore my French possessions. They're certainly worth recapturing.
Until Becket the man was made a bishop, and his king lost him to God.
Again, this scene, this movie has some probably like the most boss bishop scene
The story of one of the bitterest personal feuds known to history reveals the heartbreak, the conflict and conspiracy that engulfed the lives of a king and the one man he favored above all others. Starring Richard Burton as Becket, Peter O'Toole as his king.
I would have gone to war with all England's might behind me and even against England's interest to defend you, Thomas. I would have given away my life laughingly for you. Only I loved you, and you didn't love me. That's the difference.
Human passions at their best and their worst.
Quick! Out through the window!
They are revealed in the story of Becket. Here are the escapades that brought a blush to the country's face as they winced and brawled their way across the pages of history.
Thomas! Thomas, come here! Look at this. She stinks a bit, but we could wash her. What would you think of it?
Yeah, okay. So basically, this film right here has some promiscuity in it, but is not. It's not abysmal. It's not scandalous. They try their best to be modest or to imply things, much like the films of the 1960s go. The history of the time period is it's fascinating because it is shortly after William the Conqueror. If you know anything about William the Conqueror and the Battle of Hastings, and the dynamics between the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans, the feud between them, and Henry II's children. You hear names such as John and Bridget and Behilda, Richard the Lionheart. Again, you see how these connections make the puzzles fit together. The history of this film is quite a good bridging point for certain things that happen in English history as well as church history, and has some issues that pop up with the dynamics of how church and state relate, which were started by Charlemagne even earlier than this film, but goes well into the Renaissance. So it's a bridging point of, ultimately this film is about, where does authority come from? Does it come from the king, or does it come from God? And this film does a good job of showing the church's power as well as the state's power, and how things work. I really recommend this film, despite the occasional promiscuity stuff. But that's mostly early in the film. Once you get past that, it's gone after that. So yeah, so I believe there's some storm coming, so we have some laggy issues with the internet's. That's possibly the reason why the trailers are running so slow. So I may have to end it. So this may be the last trailer.
Cleaned up a little. Richard Burton as Beckett.
You are my lord, God or no God. I would have come with you, for you had taken my heart before you captured my body.
Becket, the man of the world who became Archbishop of Canterbury. And enemy of the king.
Gentlemen, it is a supreme irony that the worldly Becket, the profligate and libertine, should find himself standing here at this moment. But here he is, in spite of himself.
Peter O'Toole, brilliant star of Lawrence of Arabia as King Henry II of England. Supported by a cast of statues.
Yeah. So.
And eminence. John Gielgud as King Louis of France. Donald Wolfett. Pamela Brown. Martita Hunt.
Beckett! Always Beckett! I am a woman. I am your wife. I'm a queen.
Get out of bed. My wretch with boredom at the sight of you. To that death. It's my whole family if you have me.
Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest? Are all
Yeah, that's arguably the most famous line in the movie. Sorry for spoilers.
around me cowards, like myself? Are there no men left in England?
Jealousy, akin to madness that breeds incitement to murder. Vengeance that bites into the very flesh.
One does not carry arms into God's house.
Please don't.
Do you want
Please don't spoil it.
your death?
The story of Beckett is recorded here. Right up to the last brutal, bloody act.
Again, so yeah. Stop sharing screen. Boom. All right. So pretty much that's example of the classics. There's one or two in there that are newer. Well, I should say, well, at least three of them were newer. We watched Day of the Siege, For Greater Glory, Black Scarlet, Pius XII, and All Seasons, and St. Thomas Becket. Again, 6 movie trailers. I really recommend watching all of these films and, just giving them a chance. Expand your film horizon if you're stuck on, films from 2000s or 20 teens or the 90s or the 80s or something. Filmmaking is the new kid on the block still. It's only relatively, barely over 100 years old at this point. And there's some really good films that are made in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. I really just recommend checking out. Not all of them are religious, but a lot of them have good moral stories, and for their time, though the picture may be hard to watch, some of them may even be black and white. I just recommend watching some of these films to expand your knowledge on film history, church history, movie history, and just if you want to get out of the rut of the modern cinema and the crap we have today, all the wokeism in movies today is just, it's abysmal. So it forces us to go back to the classics and appreciate all the more that what we have today. It's so important to be reminded of the golden age of film, as well as the cinematic silver age and the subsequent ages that follow. Again, whether it's westerns or it is, medieval Renaissance films, or it's noir or detective or mysteries or historical dramas or religious films or action films. I'm a big action movies kind of guy. There are things that you can get good uh, good creative keys from, especially in writing your own story, and get inspiration from as well. And in some cases, if a person were to write a really good story, they could use it and evangelize through non uh, excessively obvious ways. Sometimes the best films, Christian films, are the ones that don't talk a lot about Christianity, but just show it. They show it in the light. They don't talk about it, but they show it. It's kind of like the George Lucas uh, 80s movies, as well as instead the newer movies. Back then, it was show me, but don't tell me. Don't tell me about it, show me it. And that kind of got reversed in the newer films where, it was telling you as opposed to showing you. Sometimes, I mean, the old adage goes, actions speak louder than words. And you get a good Christian film with its morality, with its philosophy, with its hidden message in a film sometimes more naturally when it's not talked about but shown in action than you can with just explicitly talking about theology on film. Again, I think there's an even balance you got to strike. There's some really good theological films, I think, that talk about it, the particular issues, and they're brilliant for their day and age. Why didn't I do the Passion of the Christ or the Ten Commandments or some of the other films? Well, it's like maybe I will in a future video or something. But let's take something like Chronicles of Narnia, that trilogy, as well as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Which one would I say is explicitly has more Christian messaging, as far as like blatantly obvious? As far as it telling you more verbally, it's going to be Narnia. But as far as the deeper, more significant theological messaging, it's going to be Lord of the Rings, hands down. The entire trilogy is loaded with theological symbolism of the Catholic faith. And again, that film has a morality behind it that is very medieval fantasy Christian-esque, but not like it's not explicit. It's hidden. It's not so in your face. You have to be looking for it to find it. But the Lord of the Rings trilogy, particularly the extended editions, are the superior additions to the theatrical, but they are some of the best work in modern film in the last 20 years, 25 years. Because, they came out in 2001, 2002, and 2003. And then the theatrical or the extended editions came out on home release. And that got even more popular to where the extended editions surpass the theatrical every time. Now, each version is like 4 hours long, but the Lord of the Rings is brilliant. Brilliant. It's not so obvious that it's Christian in comparison to, say, like Narnia, but it is a morally crafted film that has the Christian themes. There's some modern Christian films. Well, I say modern, but I keep forgetting the 90s was like 30 years ago. Um, yeah, in the 90s, there are some Christian films that came out that just are not good. Like, craft wise, acting, production value, set design, audio quality, they're just not good. They're very, very limited. They're very unprofessional, very amateurish, and very uh, I don't know, just far from the top of the apple tree. Did the apple fall and hit the ground? That's the best I could say on that. It's like they're trying too hard. But my biggest problem with a lot of Christian films today is, even though they're getting better, and films like uh, uh, Vanquished, which just came out about the Vendée, and For Greater Glory, and for The Day of the Siege, when it comes to violence and showing how Christians really live in the real world, a lot of the movies, with the exception of those three, and one more, obviously, with the Passion of the Christ, a lot of Christian movies cut their rope too short. They're not willing to push the stake all the way through the heart. Basically, they're not willing to push the boundaries. There's one film that came out recently called Unplanned. It came out before this pandemic. It did show one scene that was pretty graphic, and didn't go any further. But it did enough to where it convinced you of what was happening. Now, there's another movie out there called Gosnell that tried to do what Unplanned did, but it cut corners. It cut corners, and it tied its hands behind its back. And the story, the real life story, was so gruesome that they didn't accurately put it on film. They just dropped the ball seriously, and it shows. The movie is called Gosnell. I have it. It's not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's like, yeah, it's got some good actors here and there. It's got some good acting there, but it's got a lot of bad acting as well. It's not a great film. Again, that film's an example of Christians not willing to push the envelope to show the depth of our reality. Christians live in a real incarnated world, a real flesh and blood world. Christ came into the world flesh and blood. Though he be fully God, fully divine, he is also fully man in every way, except sin. And we live in a world that is not often hospitable. We live in a world that's very brutal, very dark, very violent. And if you read the Old Testament, 75% of it to 90% of it is warfare. There's battles left and right. There's graphic scenes that happen in the Old Testament, left and right, up and down, center, forward and backwards, happening in that book between genocides and slaughters and battles and plagues, and leprosy and drownings and earthquakes and fires and rebellions and you name it. It's just all over there. And if most Christians read that, they'd be like, wow, the Bible is a very violent book in many cases. True, it is. But it's the reality we live in. Christians live in the real world. We're not going to convince people of a authentic Christianity if we water down the message and show the movie in the movie world that Christianity is all sunshine and rainbows all the time. It's like, no, there's some really brutal and hard moments. The Ten Commandments, for example, sucked to be an Egyptian. It really did. The 10 plagues are something to deal with. The parting of the Red Sea, the drowning of Pharaoh's army, walking in the desert for 40 years. The golden calf incident. It's like, that's all real. Obviously, the best film that I've ever seen and the best Christian film that I've ever seen came out in 2004 and is made by Mel Gibson. It is the best Christian movie of all time. That goes even for Ben-Hur, Ten Commandments, Beckett, The Mission, and the list goes on. The Passion of the Christ is single-handedly the best film in the world. No other story talks about our redemption. No other story talks about the value of what Christ went through for our sins, for the freedom of man from sin. That film shows the brutality of it, shows the honesty of it. It is timeless. It shows a non-nationality bias, which unfortunately other Jesus films and other biblical films often do show a nationality bias. It is so well made, so brilliant, that it gets overlooked. And dare I say, I don't know if the sequel is going to be as successful as the first one. Again, we live in a different time than we did 20 years ago. I mean, this year is the 20th anniversary of The Passion of the Christ. Came out in February, Ash Wednesday of that year. And again, that film I can only watch every now and then, and it's typically during Holy Week. It's usually Good Friday or Holy Thursday that I watch that film. And it's the best Christian movie ever made. And it's made by a sedevacantist. Mel Gibson is not in a particular agreement of Vatican II. I mean, he has his issues with the church. I will admit that. But, again, a lot of other Christian based films are made by good Christian men and women who have the heart to make a good film, but for some reason, sometimes it does not come off as well in the actual end product, the craft of it. It is often disappointing. But the good news is, if you give Christian films a chance, I think they are getting better. I think some of them realize you have to push the envelope to get people to listen to your story and not just take it as some sort of cheese fest, the watered down, you know, nonsensical religious film. It's like some films are pushing the envelope and saying, you know what? If we want to tell a story about abortion, we've got to, unfortunately, tell the full, more gruesome details and show the brutality of it to deter people away from it, to get them to make a better and different choice, right? When it comes to the Moloch sacrifice. So, again, this video has said a lot of things that are considered censored material, probably because I have mentioned a certain class of people as well as, you know, a certain action that is not favored upon politically. This age of filmmaking right now, when it comes to the wokeism of a lot of films, and even unfortunately in some cases Christian films, although not as much, because most of them won't go that far, but they're still cheesy in their own way. They're just as bad in some ways, but I believe there's an age coming where Christian films will have, or at least moral films will come back. It may take another generation or two, but they will come back because there's still a longing for good storytelling, good film making. And we live in a different age now where we have the technology that they didn't have back then. We have set designs that you can get away with so much easier than you could back then. We have easier access to travel in many cases than they did. We can get a potential new golden age of Christian film and just in good films in general later on down the line. But the problem is, you got to get through this woke stuff first. We've got to phase this stuff out, terminate the film industry as we know it, start over, and reapply the clauses of certain things that worked back in the 40s and 50s and 30s without hindering the progress we've made. And people will come back and realize they'll be challenged to want to make a new era of good quality films again. I believe truly film has got to take a serious nosedive, almost be on life support, if not die, only to come back again, because somebody's going to take up the mantle and say, this is part of the way you should check these movies out. You check these movies out, you'd be like, you know what, these are all really good movies. Well, not all of them, but most of these are pretty good movies. Why aren't we making them today? Why aren't we making them today? And they're going to say, well, film is not what it used to be. Well, let's change that. Let's pick up the mantle and start over with the film industry. Start over with making these new films that couldn't have been made 70 years ago, 50 years ago, 35, 40 years ago. There's got to be something to spark a new renaissance in film. Film is a good evangelization tool because it allows us to talk about our faith visually, not just in books and not just in the contemplation of the mind's eye, but allows you to see a director's vision of a particular story on screen that can be shared for everybody. That's the brilliance of filmmaking's industry, is the ability to show these images to the world. There should be a new renaissance in filmmaking with not just TV shows. Although I would argue on a consistent basis, a TV show is harder to do than a movie, because sometimes a movie is just a one-time event. Sometimes the movies don't always get a franchise or a sequel. But TV series often have follow-up after follow-up after follow-up. 1 season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, 5 seasons, 6 seasons, 9 seasons, 12. And if you're one of those rare ones, 15 to 20 seasons. Again, episode after episode after episode, day and night, working your tail off to get these series made. But we're in such a rut, filmmaking wise, right now, that we're obsessed with remakes, we're obsessed with sequels, we're obsessed with the things that have been tried before and worked. We're not doing anything new as much as we should to try to push the knife through all the way. And it is showing. We are losing creativity as a culture. Like, we need good creative films again. There's too much CGI. A lot of the times, the films today have all the visual effects artists, people complaining about not having enough time finishing the visual arts on a particular film, whether it's a big cinematic universe kind of film, whether it's Marvel or monster movies or DC or Star Wars or whatever they may have been or are. It's like a lot of these actors are just not getting, or these visual graphic designers are not getting their sufficient time to make the craft look well. A lot of these CGI scenes are so oversaturated, so overused, that they have to work on each scene at the minimum a certain amount of time before they move on to the next scene. And sometimes the previous scenes are not complete or not satisfactory. And they fail and they suffer because of it. It's like, there's a film that I remember called The Scorpion King. Came out with The Rock, like 2001, 2000, somewhere in there. So 20-something years ago. And you can tell that The Rock on top of a giant scorpion, the CGI was so horrendous that it completely throws you out of the film. Like, are you serious? This is not good CGI. And the 90s had a lot of that too. In some cases, the early 2000s as well, and the mid 2000 teens. Any film that is overly saturated with CGI, first of all, it's going to make your product age horribly long term, unless you have a very specific blend of real graphics and CGI and practical effects. You get that nice blend together, you might be able to have something that's timeless. Outside of that, if you overuse CGI, guarantee your CGI, especially if you're making it back in the 2000s or the 90s, is going to age within the next 5 to 10 years. And it's going to be like, what is that? What looked good then does not look good now. That is the nature of CGI. Bad CGI does not age well. Does not age well. Tell me I'm wrong in the comments. Tell me I'm right in the comments. I don't know. So we need a new renaissance of films to show Christian as well as moral films again. And I think CGI has an opportunity to do that, as well as the desire to bring practical effects back. I think the films that are going to use the blend of real effects as well as CGI those are the ones that are being starved for right now. Like, everyone's longing to have those films again because they look so real, they're so timeless, they're treasures, and often they're masterpieces in terms of their convincibility of their of how well they engage you in the story, how well they put you in the story and not take you out of the story. Like Terminator 2, I know just had I know I said I'm an action guy. I love action movies, especially when I was younger. But Terminator 2 is one of the best special effects films of the 90s. And it still holds up today. The few scenes that it uses the CGI stands out as high caliber. Can't tell if it's practical effects in some cases versus, real. I mean, there's like one scene that I can think of that you can tell it looks like a tinfoil that's just slightly photoshopped up to make it look a more liquid metalish. But it's outside of that, it's just really a good film in terms of graphics. Really, it is one of the best in the 90s. Jurassic Park. Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park, the first one. We're not talking about any of the other ones. The first one. Practical effects as well as revolutionary CGI. It still holds up. for a 90s film, 1993, 1994. That film's 30 years old now, 31 years. It is still a top-notch, one of the best CGI films that you could see within the last 35 years. Top notch. Top notch. What else? There is. Goodness. Avatar. Again, I have only seen Avatar one time in 2009 on the big screen, where I think is the only place you can actually see that film and get its full appreciation, because it was meant for 3D. It was meant for 3D cameras, 3D television, 3D projectors. I tried watching it in 2D. I have not seen, I'm talking about the first Avatar. I'm not talking about the second. I have not seen the second, and I don't want to see the second. I think the first did its job well, and the scenes I remember were quite engaging. It wasn't just a few either, not like other fake 3D films, but where like the other 3D films had like one or two, three scenes that are like really 3D. They pop out at you from the screen. The first Avatar movie in theaters with the 3D glasses were some of the best 3D that I've seen in a movie theater. And that was 2009. So that was, 15 years ago. So I really recommend checking that out in 3D somehow. If you get a re-release and it's on IMAX 3D or something, go check out the original Avatar and tell me if it holds up, because I've only seen it once and I've tried watching it in 2D. It's just not the same. And I have a feeling the graphics wouldn't be that great by today's standards anyway. So I just wonder how the eye-popping 3D parts would stand out. So, but yeah, I've only seen Avatar once as far as the 3D full on as you should see the film kind of situation. What else? Again, we can make movies today that could break the narrative of a lot of the general mainstream says about Christianity and Catholicism and morality in this day and age, if we had the right people, the right directors, the right writers, and the right men and women that have the heart to do it, that actually have the heart to engage in reshaping the next film renaissance era, of the next golden age. I believe we have to have the death first. Like, some sort of dying has to happen of this colossal nightmare of wokeism in the film industry before we get back to an age of creativity, morality, and vision got to have vision again. We've got to have guts. And what's really important too is that we take the anvil, we take the hot orange, yellow, glowish steel, and we get the hammer, and we hammer it at the right time, and unfold this new piece of metal, this new piece of film with remembrance of the old, like the good old stuff, but also embellishing the new. Seeing a flow of good filmmaking will beget more good filmmaking, because the good films are what inspire us to make films in the first place. We don't want to make bad films, right? But the challenge of the new age of filming is going to have in the future is not going back so far that you lose some of the good stuff that happened in that post golden age era, like movies like Hacksaw Ridge, Saving Private Ryan, For Greater Glory, Passion of the Christ. Were all made in post 1930s through 60s rule book era, golden age era. They push the bars and they stand out for it. They're some of the best, most memorable films of their decades. And they are what Christian films should be for the next age. Like, we should get more of those, left and right, up and down, side to side, forwards and backwards, consistently, of that caliber, but only if you're willing to push it. Only if you're willing to actually go the bounds. If you're willing to dive off the cliff into the river and just absorb the creativity of filmmaking and let the story be. Sometimes you just gotta let the story be. Roll the dice and let the things fold or unfold where they be. As difficult as that may be, that is what's recommended. I'm trying to think of particularly war films that were made post Saving Private Ryan and post 2016 that were memorable. And they're not sticking out with me. I mean, there's 1917, and then there is Dunkirk. But truth be told, I was very underwhelmed by Dunkirk. I thought it was a obscure kind of, didn't know what I wanted to be kind of film. I thought it was highly overrated and disappointing. Now, a Thin Red Line, or Band of Brothers, or Faith of Our Fathers, or Letters to Iwo Jima, or something like that, or Tora Tora Tora. Again, Some of those that I just mentioned are better than others in terms of quality, but the two best war films that I've seen in memory recently in the last 25 years, Saving Private Ryan, in terms of realism, Saving Private Ryan and Hacksaw Ridge. Funny thing, another Mel Gibson film. Now, I have my issues with Mel Gibson on some of his other films. I don't think all his films are great in terms of, like spectacular masterpieces. Um, but, or particularly realistic. I'm thinking Braveheart, for example. I love Braveheart, but it's not like the most realistic, and it has its problems. The Patriot has its problems. We Were Soldiers has its problems. Yeah, there's a few other films that he directed that have their problems. But again, it's just we have to remember that Christian films need a new golden age, and just all filming in general need a new golden age. And no director is perfect. We need people to have the guts to change the system, but also honor the good part of the system, and to learn from the bad. Like, the problem with history today, and this is political, so beware, it is very political. The problem with modern history today is the reason why people are tearing down statues and, vandalizing buildings and changing names of schools and everything like that is because we don't teach the good, the bad, and the ugly. We only teach, in many cases, the bad, and this causes people to get jaded perspectives on their own country or their own state, and then they become self-retaliatorial on their own native land, on their own native country. The reason why film is so important to change this is because it can tell you the truth. It can tell you the disturbing truths as well as the beautiful truths. And that's the two-sided coin of truth. Truth is beautiful, but also times it can be very disturbing. And sometimes we don't want to know the very disturbing part, but we have to. We have to know the good, the bad, and the ugly in our culture, in our economy, in our governments, in our education, as well as our entertainments. We've got to know it. We've got to make good stories again. Does America have a lot of heroes? Yeah, it does. Does it have a lot of villains? Absolutely, it does. Yes. Does it have a lot of suspicious stuff in there that you don't know what side it takes, good or bad? Yes, it does. It is a boiling pot of information that is overflowing. And there is a lot of story to tell, but you got to get the right people to tell the story. You got to get the right people to have the guts to do it, and just let the story be the story and not censor it. The censorship is a two-sided sword that can self-amputate or it can slay your enemy. We need to slay the enemy to show the potency of the truth and not self-mutilate our own selves and our own creativity. Otherwise, we just end up self-criticizing ourselves to no end, and nobody pushes the envelope of making things better. Like, we've got to take the good of filmmaking, and if we can use it for the Christian purpose, the Catholic purpose of evangelization, telling the stories of the lives of the saints, telling the lives of the history of the church, and how it interplays and with other nations and world history, then that's what we should do. I showed you 6 films that are all religious in nature, that were all good. There was other films out there that I was going to show that were not good, but we'd be here all night if we did that. It's brilliant. It is truly brilliant how the few good ones stand out amongst the thousands of bad ones. I really recommend checking out the good ones. It will make you want to get into filmmaking if you have an eye for photography and film, or maybe even screenplays. Again, we need to be able to fix this problem, and something's got to happen to the current system before we can build the new age of film. Whether it means the death of CGI temporarily, or the death of blockbuster movies for a while, or just the death of the movie theater. I mean, streaming is the future. I believe that. I do believe streaming is the future. It's already here. And I will end on this. Back in 2020, when the movie theater shut down because, the pandemic and everything, there was a movie that was supposed to come out in May of that year. However, the theaters didn't open back up until like June or July. So there's this film that was pushed back to August of 2020. I kid you not. You could see it in theaters, or you could see it live stream it at home, or wherever you may be. One-time price for a 24-hour rental. You can watch as many times as you want for one 24-hour period. I only watched it once. I don't want to watch it again because I think there's a better film out there, and even the other better film has its problems. But this particular film, it's called Fatima 2020. Oh my gosh. I think at the time it was like $20 to rent at home, one TV, 4 people, my wife, myself, my son, my daughter. My youngest one over here wasn't born yet, but still $20 in August to see that movie streaming at home, one-time price. Watch the film for as many times as you want in a 24-hour period, if you choose to, for 4 people. Now, had I gone to the movie theater, kids might have been, at that time, $13, $12, $10 a ticket. I'm already exceeding that just for my two kids. That's $20 just for the kids alone. Adult tickets, $15 each. You know, how much am I spending there? You know, 20, 15, that's 35, another 15. Yeah, it's $50 right there. So I saved more than half the money live streaming for a one-time rental at home versus going to the theater and spending $50, not counting commodities or concession foods, which would have cost, you know, probably another $20 to $30 at the time. Yeah, that right there was an eye-opener for me. Now, I haven't done streaming movies since then with the family, mostly because, you know, I'm not really happy with the quality of films, but I see that as the potential future. Like, very few nowadays are modern films breaking the $1 billion, except for the big blockbusters. Very few people are going to the theater to do that. They're watching it at home. They're watching in the comfort of their own house or going over to a friend's house and, you know, watching it from there. So are you trying to tell me that theaters are going to survive this crisis? I don't think they are. They're going to go the way of the drive-through. And the only time you would go to a big theater like that is for the big blockbuster movies, if they're any good. If not, then, you know, people are going to be like, you know what, I'll just stream it later. Like, I'm trying to think. So there's a few films that... Yeah, Avatar 2 came out. Did not want to see it live stream or on theater. Yeah, the new Planet of the Apes movie is coming out. No desire to see that. Yeah, man, there's been a lot. And like so many of for some reason, my head is just not adequately coming up with like a good number of them. Goodness. I think Top Gun Maverick was actually one of the more recent films that broke the $1 billion, because that actually was like one of the few films that were not woke. Man, I did kind of want to see that one, but you know, that was 2 years ago. I don't know. A lot of the Marvel movies I've been disappointed in. A lot of the DC movies I've been disappointed in. Obviously, you know, most of the other franchises have been killed. The Predator franchise, Terminator, Aliens next to die, probably. You know, Star Trek, Star Wars. They've all taken hits the last 10 years with their films. And it is shown. It is shown horribly. But anyway, like I said, I wanted to close on that story. I believe that myself and my family watching that one-time live stream in August of 2020 of a film that was supposed to release back in May of that same year was the sign of the future to come. The death of the movie theater is imminent, because you could say it's just so much more money. And in this day and age of inflation and things being so high, but people still wanting entertainments, people will find ways to save money and still get entertained. And the live streaming just makes more sense. It's more convenient. You don't have to pay for babysitting. If you have kids, you don't have to do uncomfortable chairs. It's like next 5 to 10 years, the movie theater is not going to be able to sustain itself. And we'll see where these live streaming services take us. But yeah, so like I said, we need to check out good films. We need to be inspired by them wherever we can find them. And some of them might have different emphasis on music, acting. Some of them may be grandiose for location reasons. Some of them may be for acting purposes. Some of them may be for comedy. Some of them may be for purely special effects. You name it. There is a market out there for good filmmaking, and we need it back. Until then, keep searching and be hopeful. So, peace out.